There was one amplifier in particular this year that I felt stood out above the crowd. Those of you who regularly follow this channel probably got a good guess as what it might be. It was a real paradigm shifter as far as I was concerned. But before I talk about that amplifier, there are a few others that I'd like to give you a quick overview of that I felt were special in their own right. I reviewed the Willsenton R8 with stock tubes back in 2021. It's understating things to say that I was impressed with that amplifier. If you're in the market for an amplifier for circa £1,000, I don't think you can do much better. The R8 is a tube amplifier that comes in standard form with 6 SN7s for power supply filtering. That's the one in the middle. It's flanked either side by a pair of 6 SL7 tubes for the preamplification stage, which hand over to a pair of 6 SN7s on the extreme left and right for the driving stage. The big 4 tubes that you see at the back are for the power amplification stage. Here you have a choice of tube and mode of operation. The R8 can run KT88 tubes for a more dynamic presentation, or EL34s for that cozier sound that many associate with tube amplifiers. By the press of a button, you can switch the tube to run in ultralinear or triode mode. That also influences the sound, respectively trading clarity and dynamics for a fuller presentation. In 2022, China HiFi, the global retailer for Willsenton, sent me some PS Vane tubes to play with. There's some downsides to owning a tube amplifier. Tubes can be microphonic, temperamental, and don't last forever, but swapping tubes, or tube rolling as it's commonly called, is a lot of fun. I replaced the 4 stock KT8 power tubes for the PS Vane T2 collection tubes that retail on the China HiFi website for about $350 and the 3 6SN7 tubes for CV181s that take care of the rectification and the driving section. They'll set you back about $170. You'll have to add the cost of shipping and taxes, so in the UK you're looking at about £450 all in. Conventional wisdom states that if you're going to change one set of tubes, change the power stage tubes first, because they're supposed to have the most impact on the sound. I didn't find that to be the case. I found that by changing the 6 SN7 tubes, now remember one of those is for rectification and 2 are for the driver stage, they had just as much impact on the sound. So those of you who've already got a Willsenton R8 and are considering tube rolling, I'd suggest bite the bullet and go for both sets at the same time, and these are primarily the reasons why. Swapping out just the power tubes fundamentally shifts the tonal balance, filling out the mid-range and giving the R8 a much more grown-up type of musical presentation. The bass is much better controlled and there's a lot less bleed through to the mid-range, which means it's much easier to track individual instruments within the mix. There's also a marked improvement in overall refinement, especially in the upper mid-range, which can, over long periods, sound a little bit glassy and fatiguing with the standard tubes. The only problem is that the highs become a little bit recessed. You'll miss that airiness on top. I certainly did. Well, that's exactly what gets sorted when you switch in the 3 CV181s. The tonal balance shifts again, but this time from distinctly warm to just mildly on the warm side of neutral. That transparency and airiness on top re-emerges, but this time with much better sibilance control than the R8 in stock form. The soundstage also opens up considerably, making it not only easier to track individual instruments, but to determine their location as well. The overall effect of upgrading both sets of tubes is not subtle. It elevates one of the finest amplifiers below £1,000 to become one of the finest amplifiers below £2,000. As for partnering equipment, I couldn't live with the R8 in standard form feeding my Proact Response 1SCs. It just doesn't have the clarity, refinement and body in the mid-range. That's precisely what you gain by upgrading to the PS Vane T2 collection tubes. It would be remiss of me to close out the year without discussing the Willsenton R800i that I reviewed in September 2022. In many ways, this could be considered the big brother of the R8, but it's a totally different design. The R800i is a beast of an amplifier, weighing 42 kilograms or £93. I literally felt my back tighten up the first time I had to lift it. Most of that weight is down to the 3 massive encased transformers towards its rear, one for the power supply and one for each channel on the output stage. There are 2 versions of the R800i available, a low powered one running 845 power tubes outputting 23 watts per channel to be used with high sensitivity speakers. The version I reviewed was designed to use 805 power tubes and is capable of outputting 48 watts per channel. Oh, you can't buy one version and then just swap out the tubes later. They are not interchangeable. What the 2 variants have in common are that they're both pure Class A, single-ended triode designs using no negative feedback. If you want more details, you'll find that in my full review, which I'll link in the description box. But basically, this is a very purist type of tube amplifier. SET or single-ended triode designs are prized for their expansive soundstage and their liquid, smooth, rich mid-range presentation. This one runs 3 sets of triode tubes, 6 SN7s for the preamp, 300Bs for the driving stage, and 805As for the power stage. Both variants of the R800i retail for about $2,000 on the China HiFi website. By the time you've added shipping and taxes, that's likely to creep up to circa $2.5 grand delivered to your door in the UK. Let's talk about the 2 party tricks that this amplifier has. Firstly, the soundstage. It is massive. I mean, wider and deeper than any amplifier that I've reviewed to date. This is exactly what you'd expect from a good SET design. They just sound so 3-dimensional, and this is generally credited to the linearity that is inherent in triode tubes. It just means that the designer can get away from using negative feedback and the time smearing effects that can introduce. The R800i's second party trick is its sheer saturation of vocals and instruments. You may hear this described as harmonic richness, acoustic mass, or just meat on the bone, but everything sounds just so full-bodied with this amplifier. Coloured, you bet ya, but it's immensely enjoyable when it comes to listening to vocals and acoustic instruments. The only solid-state amplifier that I know that can run the R800i close in these 2 particular traits is my own Exposure 21 preamp and 18 super mono blocks, where the SET valve amplifier can't match my reference pre-monos is in overall detail, and there are many solid-state amplifiers that you could buy for £2,500 that will have tighter bass control. The highs are a little bit rolled off and the transient attack to the leading edges of notes a bit softened, but this is with the standard tubes. If you did a bit of tube rolling and upgraded the tubes, I'd expect things to clean up, tighten up and open up, because that's exactly what happened with the R8 when I upgraded to the PS Vane T2 collection tubes. But a note of caution here. Triode tubes can get expensive. You could spend as much rolling 300B and 805A tubes as you did on the amplifier itself, even more if you track down new old stock exotic vintage variants. People with deep enough pockets should by all means do that. At the end of the day, the R800i is just a platform to take as far as you wish, but you could experiment for a lot more modest sums of money. I think the PS Vane T2 collection tubes on the China HiFi website represent pretty good value for money, and I base that on the experience I have with those brand of tubes with the R8. You could upgrade all 3 stages of amplification tubes, and you know what, if I was doing it, I'd upgrade the rectifier tube, the 274B in the middle as well. That'd set you back around $700. Of course, you can be adding shipping and taxes on top of that. And I'd be itching to do that if I had this amplifier. I think it's a fairly safe bet. It'll take performance to another level. You need to pair the Willsenton R800i with speakers that can show off the tonal goodness and the dimensionality of this amplifier. Regular viewers will be aware of exactly what I'd use, but you should be fine with something like a Harbuth, Spendor Classic Series, Graham Audio, or an LS35A. Before I go on to choose my amplifier of the year for 2022, I just want to briefly talk about the HiFi Rose RS520 that I recently reviewed on this channel. I know, it only got a recommended from this channel, but I miss that amplifier. So let's deal with the negatives first. Some people will have valid concerns about the long-term serviceability and reliability of a one-box unit of such complexity. I mean, let's face it, it just about has every type of connection you could wish for, including HDMI eARC. If you want to learn more about what the RS520 is capable of, check out my full review linked in the description box of this video. Concerns about how long the firmware will be updated and the app supported are understandable when you're shelling out, well, the best part of £3,500 for a box of tricks. But I have an iPad that must be approaching 10 years old now. Actually, my son has it, but it's still going strong. And I think there's a market out there for people looking for a one-box solution such as this, expecting similar longevity. Besides, I only pulled it back from highly recommended to recommended because of a video latency issue. The delay between the lips moving and me hearing the sound with video content was unacceptably long in my book. Now, after my review, the feedback that I got from the UK distributor was this may only be an issue with certain types of TV, and HiFi Rose is on the case. And that's my point. There's a big tech giant behind this company with a lot of engineering prowess. They're new to the hi-fi space, and sure, there's a couple of issues for them to sort out, but their current offerings show a lot of promise. I think NAD and NAME have got something to worry about with their M10 and Unity Atom. The user interface is very slick, making the RS520 a joy to interact with, whether you're navigating screens on the app or flicking through them on the massive 12.6-inch wide display. Yes, it has a typical Class D sound, super clean, detailed, with a leaner mid-range, but with 250 watts per channel on tap, it will drive practically any speaker on the planet, and it shows with regular speakers. The bass is as well controlled as any amplifier I've heard. It's time to talk about the winner. The Cambridge Audio AXA35 retails for £399 in Britain. It looks like a traditional Class AB analog amplifier from the outside, but it uses a chip-based amplifier module. I know what you're thinking. I thought the same thing. That can't be any good. I believe it's the Texas Instruments LM3886. The specs seem to bear that out. The AXA35 is capable of delivering 35 watts per channel into an 8 ohm load. That should be ample for the kind of speakers it's likely to be partnered with. There are 4 analog inputs. You even get a phono stage for turntable users. There's no built-in DAC, but a 5-volt USB power input, so you can connect one of a number of external DACs that run off 5 volts. I wasn't expecting much given its design, but oh my word were my preconceptions shattered. The AXA35 sounds like it belongs to a class above, embarrassing many amplifiers costing twice its price. I suppose the most remarkable quality about its sonic presentation is that it doesn't have any obvious shortcomings. It has surprising levels of clarity and a soundstage as wide as any amplifier I've heard below £1,000. The bass has weight, giving it a sense of authority whilst maintaining reasonable levels of definition at the same time. The mid-range is where the rubber meets the road. It has a fullness of presentation that sets the AXA35 apart from so many amplifiers at this price and above. Okay, so it's coloured on the warm side of neutral and the highs are a little rolled off, but I find this kind of presentation a welcome departure from so many amplifiers in the sub £600 category that have a boosted bass and elevated treble to try and impress you on a quick demo. You'll grow to appreciate this Cambridge Audio amplifier the more time you spend with it. The also excellent Acoustic Energy A100 Mark IIs make an ideal partner because they have such a mature presentation for a speaker at £259. It also has a little added sparkle on top that balances the AXA35 perfectly. It's amazing the kind of system that you can put together today for less than £1,000 and that's allowing some money for the front end for a turntable or a DAC as well. The AXA35 is a standout sonic performer in a highly competitive market segment. It single-handedly changed my perspective of what I thought was possible from a chip-based amplifier, put in the hands of a competent designer where they pay attention to all the right details, like the power supply. The Cambridge Audio AXA35 is my amplifier of the year for 2022. Okay, so what do you think of my choice? And please let me know about your choice as well. What's the best amplifier that you came across in 2022? All that remains for me to say is if you like this video, you like what I'm doing with this channel, you want to see it grow and you haven't done so already, please do all that social media stuff. Check me out on Patreon for consultancy services, bonus content. Join the ABA Club on Patreon where we have periodic video calls. But for today, for now, a British audiophile signing off.